Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the EV podcast, and at 11 o'clock, we'll be switching over to Tesla Roadster podcast. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning. Welcome, everybody.
And today we've got some interesting headlines. The one behind us here, for example, is Apple going to gobble up Rivian and Fisker and Toyota? Nissan.
I think it was Fisker and Nissan. Very intriguing. I'm looking forward to talking to it. About it. I think that consolidation now might be a ripe time for consolidation, and but we'll get into that one.
Yeah. So breaking news, guys. Tesla factory in Berlin evacuated. Arson attack on the transformer station near the factory. Blackout. Production interrupted.
What that was just wild. I was reading the news, just a half hour ago. It's just now breaking, and apparently some left-wing militant, I just call them terrorists, but they call themselves an environmental group. I don't know why they call that. Have set fire to a large transformer and a high voltage power line in Germany near the Tesla plant. And in so doing, they actually cut power to large portions of the plant itself.
Mm-hmm. And this was an intentional, of course, terrorist act. And the group is classified, again, as left-wing extremists known as the Volcano Group. They've claimed responsibility for an attack on this power supply. And the protests that they're attached with is against the U.S. car manufacturer. In fact, they're quoted as saying, "We have sabotaged Tesla today." And the Brandenburg police currently suspect arson, and the State Protection Unit of the State Criminal Police has begun an investigation.
Well, and they talk about how they're very proud to have stopped the production of 6,000 monster trucks and vehicles, and it's craziness.
What Tesla is projecting at this point is that production will be stopped for several days, most likely the rest of this week, and they do not expect it to start again until next week, according to plant manager Andre Thierig, who made that statement this morning. The economic damage of this is high nine-figure range as a result of the production stop. Well, I had to do some mental math to figure out how much that was, and then it makes sense because the company now, Tesla, produces more than 1,000 vehicles a day in Grünheide or at this Berlin plant.
Sure, and with those kind of numbers, the Tesla stock took a big hit after hours as well. That's currently down about 5% just because of this particular terrorist attack.
Right. Now, of course, Elon had to weigh in on this, and he did. Mm-hmm. And on X, he says, "These are either the dumbest eco-terrorists on Earth, or they're puppets of those who don't have good environmental controls or goals." He says stopping production of electric vehicles rather than fossil fuel vehicles is extremely dumb.
Oh, it really, really is. And so to me, my first thought on this is, okay, I'm going to get this straight. In the name of protecting the environment, especially the forest that's around the Tesla plant, people are setting fire to a large transformer located in the middle of the forest.
Right. And, my only take on this is possibly it is a reaction to the fact that so many frogs, or was it snakes, were displaced.
Yeah, snakes and lizards.
Snakes and lizards during the construction of the factory. And but it looks like we've got people chiming in. Ray Johnson, welcome, Ray. Welcome back from YouTube. He says, "Good morning from Reno, Tahoe. Survived the Sierra Nevada blizzard of 24. Thanks to all you do." Well, you're more than welcome. And, we've got a Tesla Roadster that was supposed to be picked up going to Vancouver Island.
Uh-huh.
And it turns out at the last minute, we had some error codes that we needed to clear. And we thought, how are we going to do this now? The transporter drove all the way here to pick it up and all that. It turns out he got snowbound up in the Reno, Tahoe area, and he won't be here till the end of the week. So that was a serendipitous event.
Absolutely. I've seen some pictures from up there. Ray, you have my respect for being up there. Several feet of snow on top of homes, on top of cars.
Yeah.
It honestly, it looks like a ski slope with moguls. It doesn't look like homes and cars.
Really? Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Highlander on YouTube also says, "Hey gang, kindness is always free. P.S. to Pete. Beat.
The old Plymouth Roadrunner.
Oh yes, back to these environmentalists or this volcano group. Their logic doesn't make sense to me. They're trying to shut down production of the greenest car factory in Europe, probably.
Good point.
Making one of the greenest cars on Earth today, so that they can produce more fossil cars? Is that what they're trying to do? I mean, it's on par with the voluntary human extinction movement. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with that particular environmental group, they're advocating for the extinction of humankind as the only means of saving the environment.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I guess the end result would be there, but how to get there is certainly a problem.
Yeah. It's almost like what is the word? The cure is worse than the disease.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. It looks like China's automobile exports jumped 47.4% year to year this January. This is there's some other news that is currently percolating, which is that EV sales are down globally. So this is pretty remarkable if China was able to, increase during this time period.
Yeah, I'm still not sure if I buy the idea that EV sales are down. That's almost like the U.S. government having budget cuts.
Yeah.
Are you really cutting your budget, or are you simply not increasing at the rate that you wanted to increase? And I think the latter is true in this case too. I read something this last week about the politics of electric vehicles and going green. The Biden administration is all about green energy. Let's go green. Let's save the planet.
Mm-hmm. And the GM is leading the charge.
That's right. It seems like the Biden administration is all for going green, unless going green means buying from China.
Yeah, good point. Mm-hmm.
If you're buying from China, no, we're not doing that. We'll stay with fossil fuels. Thank you. And the fact is, I get it. Chinese is making a bunch of cars. They're sending cars all over the world. They're increasing their influence all over the world by the fact that they can provide a low-cost, reasonable quality product. Mm-hmm. And people are buying it. BYD is now the biggest EV builder in the world, not Tesla. Okay. Why don't we just bring these Chinese cars in already? If we believe in a free marketplace, bring them in, let them disrupt the marketplace, and see what the open market says. Mm-hmm. If they're junk, people won't buy them.
Right.
If they do have reasonable quality, you're achieving your green energy goals. Mm-hmm. What's to lose?
Yeah.
And but I know that it's not the political thing to say.
There's a lot of politics involved in that. Yes,
there's a lot of politics involved. But that's my thought on it, is that if we have a chance to get a $17,000 car that gets 180 miles of range as a city commuter, that's about what the Seagull would go for here in the United States after tariffs and extra import taxes, then let it come in, for goodness sakes. And at some point, I think it will.
And then we reach that tipping point that we've all been waiting for, which is it's no longer economically attractive or feasible to buy an ICE car.
Exactly.
YouTube, Bernard Homan. Saludos de Toluca, Mexico. Greeting from Toluca, Mexico, of course. Yeah.
Oh, welcome.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
I had a question, Mark, about that statement you guys just made about opening up China and maybe repealing some of the Trump era stuff and some of the Biden stuff on tariffs. How do you guys think that would affect the labor market here? If we're getting everything cheap from there, and would we still have companies like Tesla building factories here with U.S. workers?
It has an impact.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
You know, it does. Yes, I do think there would still be factories here. I think that our electric car makers would, and our auto industry would try to make a way. That's the reason it's not going to happen, though. We've got industry interests aligned with both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are probably going to be our two nominees for our next president, all standing together against trying to bring Chinese product into the United States. So politically, it's not going to happen. But I see that, yeah, there'd be a big ripple effect across this, and that's a deep conversation that I don't think we'd have time to do this morning.
You know, we've had these levels of disruption throughout history. As a kid, I remember when you went and bought electronics, it was Zenith, RCA, GE. Those are big names for televisions, radios, consumer electronics. And Japan in the 60s was considered a inferior product. In fact, made in Japan had a very negative connotation. There was even a lot of jokes made about that. So that must be from Japan. And then Japan began to send us product that was superior to the things that were made here. It was newer technology. You know, the old Zenith TVs were handmade, hand-wound. All the components were hand-soldered, highly inefficient. Japan came in with Nakamichi, Panasonic, Sony, all the brands that eventually began to dominate the home audio market. And they were well respected. They were better than, the American-made stuff.
Right. The Japanese learned how to get quality right. Of all things, they went to Richard Deming, who is an American-born person who actually set up quality assurance controls and taught the Japanese his quality assurance controls because the Americans wouldn't listen to him.
Is that right?
Yeah. It was one of the courses I had to take on quality assurance in some of my college career.
So the stigma that used to exist, made in China, is somehow inferior. The little trinkets and the things that you buy at the dollar store. That's not the type of product that China is interested in flooding the globe with. Cars, for example. And if they truly were inferior, they would quickly be drummed out of business.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Pete. And the approach that China has taken to making their electric vehicles has been kind of the opposite of the U.S. approach as well. In the United States, Tesla has defined the approach for making EVs. Start with a super expensive, very niche car to prove your concept, and then work your way down from there. China did exactly the opposite. Their first electric vehicles typically were no-frills taxis and other things like that were super cheap to buy, but were also super cheap to produce. They've learned how to cheaply build electric vehicles, and now they're going into building better quality and not just being cheap.
Yeah. And, these tariffs oftentimes have a negative impact. They stifle creativity. We'll report on this. We don't have all of the details yet, but there's a company called Electromechanica, which made a little solo 3-vehicle EV.
Yes.
They're here in East Mesa. We were just there buying some production equipment. They are closing down a 325,000 square foot production facility where they were importing and finalizing these 3-wheelers. And this story has not yet been corroborated, but it looks like the reason for the demise of this 3-wheeler was the tariffs were just unbearable. And according to one of the individuals we spoke with off the record, they were more than the MSRP. I can't imagine how that's even remotely possible. But currently, there are hundreds of these 3-wheelers that are being crushed, just like the GM EV1 in 1994. I saw hundreds of them. They're beautiful little cars. Well built, definitely eco-friendly, single passenger, by the way, and 80-mile range, commuter cars, basically. And for no better reason than the tariffs are too high, and they're now going to recoup all their tariffs by crushing them. These cars are going to meet an untimely death.
That's just so sad to hear, because I was excited to see what the Solo was going to look like. I had seen the Electromechanica would put their Solos in some of the malls and stuff around, so I've seen one live, and it was such an intriguing little car. I thought, wow, this is going to be something interesting to see on the road when it occurs.
And it was a niche vehicle. It wasn't your, luxury Model S, EV, grocery getter, four-door sedan, hold the entire family. This was a commuter car, which is extraordinarily efficient if you think about it. I mean, what kind of distance do people drive to go to work and back?
Right. Usually it's under 20 miles both ways.
Yeah. And so that 80-mile range really would have had a huge impact on the environment rather than, carrying around a large four-door vehicle.
And that's the kind of car that your young college crowd or somebody who's younger and is interested in this type of thing of being better for our environment, but they don't have money to afford anything. Those are the kind of cars that they're going to want to be able to buy.
Well, stay tuned. We're still working on that video, and it's beginning to look like we've got a repeat of the 1994 debacle where GM retrieved all of the EV1s from customers, under 2,000, I think it was, would not let them purchase them, and crushed every single one of them. And the ultimate irony is Electromechanica is very close to the same spot that GM collected all of the EV1s and crushed them. And eventually they built a high school on that property. And to preserve the historical aspect of this event, inside that high school in Mesa, Gilbert, wherever it is, there is a large mural in their cafeteria with pictures of the EV1s and being crushed.
That is... I hadn't thought of that. I know about where the Electromechanica facility is at, and you're right. The Electromechanica facility is within 1 or 2 miles of the old GM proving grounds, which is where all of the EV1s ended up meeting their end of life.
Yep. All right.
Wow.
So YouTube, Highlander, he says, don't be surprised if an owner of a brand new Cybertruck shows up at your shop. They'll mention my name, the Highlander. They would like a shop tour. Well, thank you. That will be actually the second person or third. Remember the one that...
Yeah, we had the one at night that we didn't get to see.
Yeah.
Highlander, we had somebody stop by this last week, and they had a Cybertruck.
Hey, Jesse, if you can pop up a picture, it's 0 first and then 1. And you'll see a Cybertruck that is wrapped in what's called Laguna Blue that showed up. We did a podcast that's also out on our YouTube channel with the owner. Dr. Jay Larson was kind enough to bring his truck by, even let me drive it. And I got to tell you, I was never quite sold on the Cybertruck until I got in it, drove it, and experienced it, and it changed my mind completely.
It did.
Yeah.
That's interesting to know. It's 90% joke and 10% serious. I say it's a Lego brick on wheels, because it just kind of has that look. But standing up next to it, seeing the four-wheel steering that gives it a nice tight turning radius. I thought that's kind of a cool vehicle. That definitely is interesting.
So when I first got into vehicle, it was very Spartan, minimalistic. All I saw was a screen, basically, and you really had to learn how to drive it. The park, reverse, neutral, and drive was a slider on the screen now. There was no more gear shift lever. There were no more buttons, It was no more stalks on the yoke steering wheel. And in fact, the owner had not yet figured out how to do one thing. I think it was turn on the windshield wiper, which, by the way, looks like it's about 4 feet long.
Yeah,
it's the biggest windshield wiper I've ever seen. So I get in the car. That was the first thing. It's very minimalistic. I start to drive it. And I realized this thing drives like a construction vehicle. It's massive. It's heavy. It is. It's just like a military vehicle.
Sure.
Until you blip the throttle a bit, and then you realize it has the performance of a supercar. It has like instant torque, instant pickup. Then driving it, I had to make a U-turn. Went down Deer Valley Road. And I thought, you know what? This is a pretty big vehicle. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make that U, you know?
Yeah.
So I made sure there was no oncoming traffic so I'm not blocking the intersection. I took that yoke wheel and I was prepared to do a number of, turns.
Yeah.
A quarter turn. The rear wheels also turn. And I made that U-turn with room to spare.
Wow.
And then the final thing about this vehicle while you're driving it is it feels, of course, extremely massive and heavy, but incredibly responsive, but it was as smooth as a Mercedes. It was just, it was unexpectedly different than anything I've ever driven before.
That's so interesting to know about. It looked very intriguing. I saw the Spartan interior on it and thought, wow, that's going to be something to have to learn how to deal with, because you're right, there were no stocks on it. There was no gear shift, no way to see how you actually communicate with the vehicle to get it drive. So you like the steer by wire then as well?
It takes some getting used to. But yeah, I mean, my first experience with it was I would be intrigued. I'm a race car guy.
Yeah.
I like to feel what's going on with the vehicle. So I'm not sure how I'm going to warm up to, this new way of driving. But
yeah, because steer by wire, you obviously can't feel how the vehicle is going because it's not connected.
Right. But so here's the second picture, and here you can see the size of the Cybertruck in amongst Tesla Roadsters. And we usually have about 50 of them inside this vehicle alone. And it was pretty remarkable to see that vehicle in amongst its early brethren,
Yes. Michael Manning, who we've had on the show a couple times, he took just 2 or 3 pictures. And but his pictures tell such a good story. And he has a picture of the Cybertruck parked right there with the reflection of the orange Roadster in it and the sunlight coming down. And it's like the newest with the heart and soul of the oldest one, and it's a sports car at heart. That picture tells a story.
Yeah,
and I loved it.
Yeah, Mike is our master mechanic, and like most great photographers, they are able to see things that other people don't see. And Mike always, comes up with these spectacular shots.
He is a talent. There's no question. Because I was there taking pictures here and there just because I wanted to have it to remind me. He walked up and showed me one picture. I'm like, oh, I gotta have that.
Yeah.
I took a picture. You told a story.
Right. TikTok, CyberBeast says on BSJA mode with 60 rear, 40 front motor setting, it's lots of fun on the track. Really? Okay.
Oh, very interesting.
Cornering, oversteer, bump steer, those kinds of things would be interesting to take one of these things on the track. The other thing that I noticed is, in fact, the owner mentioned this. He says, I usually like to let the suspension expand all the way so it sits up high. But to get in it, it's much easier if you lower it. So with his key, he was able to lower it. You get in, and then you raise it back up, And
all by keeping the suspension high, you can see better out of the vehicle. Plus, the higher suspension will give you a little smoother ride.
YouTube, Nalver53 says, I'm waiting for Sandy Munro to do a complete teardown of a Cybertruck. We all are, yeah. The thing that didn't escape my notice was it's a 48-volt architecture, and we would love to have, dived into the truck and do some reverse engineering, but Dr. J. Larson, I don't think would have tolerated that.
I don't think he would have very much. One thing Dr. Larson mentioned that I was there and heard, he said, yeah, I've had a Ford in the past with the long bed, and they're 5.5 foot long beds. And it's like, I can't lay down in it. It's my head will bump up against one end and my feet before I can stretch my feet. He said, this is a full 6 foot bed. It doesn't look like it, but it really is. I can lay down head to foot from the top of the bed to the bottom and not have to drop the bumper or anything.
Sure.
And so it's a bigger bed than a lot of the pickups that are out there, and you don't really realize that.
Sure. There are things you have to get used to. For example, if you're used to using your rear view mirror, which I think all of us are, If you put the tonneau cover down, you won't be able to use that rear view mirror anymore. You now have to use the screen.
Yes.
And it took me a year or so of driving my Model S's before I actually felt comfortable relying on the screen when backing up. You know, it's just not something that I was used to. I like the mirrors on the sides and on the rear view. But I think this next generation is going to teach us some new things.
I think so too. I also think I remember my son sitting next to me in my Model S. Every once in a while that it has a glitch, for lack of a better way of saying it. Your software doesn't respond quickly. And he was freaked out that I was backing up and the backup screen wasn't on. I'm like, well, but I have mirrors.
Right. The fallback. Number of people chiming in. TikTok, Cyberbeast, thanks for joining us. Sorry, Baja.
Oh, yes, instead of BSJ.
Okay. And then Cyberbeast on TikTok as well. He said, why did Ferrari McLaren never think about steer-by-wire? I don't know if they never thought about it. I'm sure that there are some technical challenges. In fact, the Cybertruck also has an adjustable drive-by or steer-by-wire, depending on the speed that it's going.
Right.
And all of that has to be factored into firmware somewhere. And I'm not sure that that the companies mentioned really had their software act together well enough to incorporate something like this into their vehicles.
And that's a good point, because you just mentioned it. All you had to do is turn your steering wheel a quarter of a turn, and you were slow, so it had hard turned already.
Right.
If you had been going 40 miles an hour, I guarantee you those wheels would not have turned nearly as much.
Right. YouTube, Stephen Rose says, I have ordered a Cybertruck. I'm not a big fan of wrapping a vehicle. What are your thoughts of painting the Cybertruck versus wrapping? The first comment I would have there is, it depends on how well traditional paints would bond to this type of stainless steel metal that is supposed to be something above and beyond normal stainless steel.
Right. I think if you can get it properly primed, I don't see why there would be a problem with painting it. Personally, I kind of understand Steven's idea, though. A well taken care of paint job, even here in our harsh desert environment, may end up lasting you a lot longer than a wrap would, because even the best wraps are, 7 or 8 years before they start to fade and cause problems. And a good paint job that's with fairly minimal maintenance could last 15 or 20 years.
Sure. And, looking at, we didn't spend a lot of time doing any kind of like reverse engineering with the Cybertruck. But the thing that stood out to me was the sharp angular lines, flat surfaces, 90-degree angles, for example. And in the front, someone pointed out, well, if it was an apocalypse time, you could probably, kill zombies with this thing, because the front fenders came to a sharp right angle, end.
Sure. Yeah.
And I thought about how the wrap people were able to wrap around that with a very small panel gap at that point. But yeah, there are definitely going to be some challenges, I think, finishing these trucks with anything other than leaving them stainless steel.
Yeah, I think there will be as well. I think the painting idea, if you go to a good quality paint shop, you'll probably pay around the same as you would for a good quality wrap on the vehicle, and you might get better longevity out of it. So I think, personally, I think it'd be a perfectly fine idea.
So what do you guys think of these new headlines that are now percolating? Apple buying Rivian, Nissan potentially buying Fisker. It's on the surface, it seems to make a lot of sense. Of course, there's nothing concrete yet.
Right.
And even Wall Street is not yet responding to these rumors, because that's what they are right now. But does it make sense, I guess, is my question.
Well, when you think about in the last week, Apple finally announced that they're giving up on their car.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years plus. I still don't have it. Now the words are coming out that there was been internal fighting inside of Apple about the direction they want to take. And, too many cooks in the kitchen is what I would call it, the way that I read it. I hope this happens at some level. Just think. Rivian right now, they're a company that is building out, they make 60,000 cars a year or somewhere close to that. They're building their second factory. They're going to expand their capacity. They've already proven they've got a quality product that sells. But their one potential issue is cash burn. Are they going to have enough cash to survive until they're actually profitable? Not just gross profit. I'm talking net profit here. And that's an open question.
Yeah.
So a big behemoth with some hundreds of billions of dollars in cash reserves, Apple, comes in, buys up Rivian. Now what? I think it's a great idea.
It's a good marriage. Yeah, I could see that. And unlike Lucid, which was basically a startup that was heavily funded by, as Elon put it, the Saudi sugar daddy.
Yeah.
Right? Is it possible that Apple becomes Rivian's sugar daddy, like you mentioned?
Well, yeah, I think it could be. I mean, hey, we could call it Ripple.
What was the market valuation that you guys just looked up between the Saudi PIF fund and Apple?
Well, the PIF fund itself has almost $1 trillion in it, but what I was looking up was the economy of Saudi Arabia is valued at a little over $3 trillion, and the market cap for Apple is 2.63 trillion.
All right, so there's one company that has that is almost equal to one of the richest countries on the planet.
Yeah. So I could see this being a great marriage. Likewise, I could see Nissan and Fisker being a great marriage.
Yeah.
Nissan brings a wealth of automotive engineering and build experience to a company that desperately needs help with quality and build.
Yeah, good point. In fact, they subcontract a lot of that. And of course, their strength, Fisker's strength, is design.
Yeah.
Aesthetics, that's Henrik. By the way, we have a video on Henrik Fisker, which is starting to do well on our YouTube channel. It's a short bio. It's worth watching.
It definitely is. Henrik is he is as eccentric as Elon in his way. And I'm hoping for success for all of the EV startups. I always get sad when I hear one of them fails or is struggling terribly, and just because I believe in the whole concept so much, and I think that the time will come when we won't be able to build enough EVs for the demand.
But you're right. Getting back for a moment just to Apple. Apple badly needs a mature EV production process. Rivian has that, and they're very close to being profitable.
Yeah.
This could be a perfect marriage.
Yeah, this could be a great thing. So I just that one even more than Fisker and Nissan. I hope that Rivian and Apple can happen at some point. I'll feed into that rumor gladly.
YouTube, Nolver53 says, a Cybertruck made the news recently where a driver claimed the steer-by-wire system failed. It's technology. The old traditional method was a lot of mechanical stuff. You had U-joints, and it would be very difficult to break something like that. It was going to be reliable. But, electronic stuff, glitches, rodents chewing through wires, there's an elevated risk, I guess.
Well, it all comes down to people's appetite for accepting change. It wasn't that many years ago that people would have said, why would I ever want to have a cable going back to my brake when all I have to do is pull on this handle?
Right.
And they didn't like the change that it represented. And this is another level of change. Now, we've gotten comfortable with the idea of these mechanical things, and that somebody in their garage can go in and look at it and fix it and update it and be fine. How do you update something that's literally run by an Ethernet cable?
Yeah, steer-by-wire technology is not new. It had been adopted in the airplane industry some time ago, I understand. And of course, there you have an additional margin for error that is a bit different than a car on the ground.
That's right. Things always get more interesting when you add a third dimension. And with airplanes, you've got left, right, forward, back, up, down.
It's on three planes.
It's on three planes.
Instagram, Abdurrashid_110 says hello from Uzbekistan. By the way, thank you for joining us. We're always pleased to see people from all over the globe joining these podcasts. It's amazing to us what kind of reach the social media content has typically.
Absolutely. And if, depending on where in Uzbekistan you are at, I would recommend you check 80edays.com and see if where you're at in your country is going to be anywhere close to where Rafael Demestre is going. He is taking his roadster on a journey around the world again.
VIN 507, yes, very famous roadster.
Yeah, and I believe Uzbekistan is one of the countries he's going to be driving through fairly soon on that trip.
Worth checking out. All right, we've got some pictures to throw up. Jesse, if you can throw up Diner 1. Tesla's continuing construction of its upcoming supercharger, diner, and drive-in theater project in Los Angeles, California. It's actually in Hollywood, but, Los Angeles is fine. And there is a picture that'll be popped up here shortly that shows the construction progress. It looks like a couple of the screens are under construction here. And the whole thing started actually not too long ago. It was September of last year. So they're making very good progress. It is West Hollywood site. It was originally going to be in Santa Monica. You can only imagine what property costs are in those areas. One of our customers just said something like $1,000 a square foot or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So this is quite an investment, and it looks like Tesla's passionate about this whole concept. But this is a photo that was shown on Reddit last week, and it's on so located on the north side of the parking lot. There is where the superchargers are going to be. A screen is expected to be constructed on the western side and north side, both of which will be playing clips from some of the best movies of all time, according to Elon. The actual address, if you're interested in taking your drone down there and getting some social media content, is 7001 West Santa Monica Boulevard. And making good progress, it looks like.
I'm going on vacation to California this summer with the family, and we've decided that unlike usually we'll go to Disneyland, but this time we're going to do a little different. We're going to go to Universal Studios. Okay. And I looked this up this morning and thought, well, where is this at? Okay, is it close to where we're staying or far away? It's kind of far away. It's about 50 miles. But then I found out that it's actually on the route to Universal Studios.
Okay.
It's only about 2 miles south of the Universal Studios location. So we're going to have to drive some 50 miles or so to go to Universal Studios. I might try to stop by here.
That is a must go to.
Yeah, if nothing else, I hope it would be done. I kind of doubted if this is where they're at as of a week ago. But even if they're not totally done, go stop by, take a few pictures, see what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. This is a multi-level diner, by the way. There's going to be a section up on top that is open, and it looks like 3 tiers, 3 levels. The restaurant is called Millaway's, and that's after the restaurant at the end of the universe in Douglas Adams' novel, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which apparently is one of Elon's favorite books. So yeah, definitely going to be a landmark once this is done, and the Tesla faithful, I'm sure, will be picking out this supercharger location, preferring this to others in the area.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's how many hours you're going to have to wait just to get into the parking lot to supercharge.
And speaking of waiting, one of the comments on this post was, "Can't wait to see the Optimus robots waiting the tables there."
Yes, definitely.
All right. One of the first people to flip a Tesla Cybertruck was interviewed, and they covered a number of topics, including how much profit they actually made on the sale. And we'll talk about the restrictions that Tesla imposed here in a moment, but apparently this truck was resold at the Mannheim auction for $244,000 in the past couple of weeks. And so this particular magazine tracked down the seller and got an interview. And what he shared was there were actually 2 that were flipped. And he's fully aware of Tesla's no resale policy. Apparently, there is a provision that is signed at the time that you take possession of your Cybertruck that there is a $50,000 penalty if you sell your Cybertruck within 1 year or less.
Well, and actually, it's not just $50,000. If you read the fine print, it says it is the greater of $50,000 or the selling price.
Okay.
So, the Tesla really doesn't want you to sell this vehicle. I don't know. I think the enforceability of Tesla's agreement is suspect, personally.
Well, that's what this article goes on to say, and of course, until it's tested in court, it's all conjecture. But yeah, the resale agreement may not be enforceable, although that's certainly Tesla's preference.
One thing that would be enforceable is they won't sell you another Tesla.
They won't sell you another Tesla, and as somebody pointed out, they might also disable any charging on that vehicle, which would make it more difficult to sell.
It certainly would. How hard would it be for the person who sold that Cybertruck to simply keep that Cybertruck under their account on Tesla? And let's say, okay, I'm buying a Cybertruck. I know I'm going to sell said Cybertruck. So I'm going to set up a separate Tesla account for that Cybertruck.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have my own email for it and whatever else. And then when it's time to sell that Cybertruck, I'll simply give access to that account. I'll give them my custom email and password.
Right.
And now it's still my account. How do they know I sold it?
So my other question is what really is Tesla concerned about? I mean, scalping is not highly desirable, but it's a common occurrence.
Yeah.
What's the downside to Tesla? From a manufacturer standpoint, if you're selling product or services, what difference does it make who's buying it and what they're doing after they buy it, unless it places some sort of risk on the manufacturer?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the argument that original buyer is going to be able to make in court. Tesla, at the point that they give over ownership of that Cybertruck to the person who is the original owner, no longer has an interest in that truck.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter if that truck is sold. Tesla can still get all the repair revenue they would potentially get. They can still get all the charging revenue they would potentially be able to get. There is nothing that Tesla benefits from the truck not being sold.
Right.
And there's nothing that harms Tesla either.
What about we know that it's a multiple year wait because of all of the pre-orders and everything. What if there are companies out there that are just pre-ordering a bunch of these so that they can put them on the lot to flip them? So there isn't actually, there's a false demand on Tesla to do mass production on these things at a level that they don't really have to meet in order to meet these, because there aren't as many people that actually want them. There aren't actually 2 million reservations. Like 150,000 of those are X number of dealerships trying to resell them, right? I think that's kind of what they're trying to avoid in this scenario.
And that's a good point that you make, Jesse. The counterpoint to that is until somebody goes and sells the Tesla Cybertruck, the agreement that people have to sign can be assumed to be a legal agreement. As such, that's going to chill or help put down those types of efforts because it's going to scare people off. Now, eventually, either the Cybertruck is going to reach a year old, at which point, how do you tell if a Cybertruck has been owned a year or not? And there are going to be enough Cybertrucks out there that it just won't matter.
Sure.
So the agreement's going to become unenforceable anyway, eventually. Until it's tested in court, all you can do is presume.
In the legal world, the term injury does prevail. You really have to demonstrate how is Tesla being injured by the movement of these vehicles after they've already realized revenue, anticipated revenue from the initial sale of that vehicle.
Yeah. How does Tesla prove that they missed out on the sale of a second vehicle? We have 8 years of orders, 250,000 vehicles a year times 8 years is 2 million vehicles. We have 8 years worth of back orders. Now we have 7 years and 364 days and 23 hours and 59 minutes and 59 and a half seconds worth of demand. You know, that's not harm to Tesla.
Yeah, we'd certainly love to hear from our audience what your thoughts are on this. And of course, there may be justifications that we're unaware of. So if Tesla's listening, we'd love to hear what the original reasons for this restriction
Definitely
was.
would.
All right. So Lucid is in the news a bit here, and they've set an ambitious goal of achieving an efficiency of 10 kilometers or 6.2 miles per kilowatt hour for electric cars. And this is according to Lucid's boss, Peter Rawlinson. This level of efficiency, he says, is the holy grail that will help EVs save the planet. Achieving this target, they say, would result in a car with a range of 300 kilometers or 186 miles using only a 30 kWh battery pack.
It's a fascinating thing, and I did a few numbers on this to try to translate it, because those are nice round numbers that mean nothing to me. 10 kilometers, okay, well, that's little over 6 miles for a kilowatt hour. I drive an electric vehicle. My Tesla, as virtually all Tesla Model S's, does their mileage based on an ideal 300 watts per mile. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, what would this be? You know, this is 161 watts a mile. So it's only about a 40% improvement over what we get today with the Model S. In fact, my all-time best, I was going from visiting a relative in the Tucson area down to a charger, and I was up in the foothills, and then the charger was downtown. I hit that. Over 25 miles, I had 161 watts a mile for 25 miles. It's not overly ambitious. I think it's totally achievable. And so of course, you know, I'm a numbers guy. So I thought, okay, well, last week we talked about numbers going down, cost of raw materials going down. Lithium is down 90%, nickel is down 50%. You know, and we also know, because we are a manufacturing company, Gruber Communication Products manufactures cables. In a lot of manufacturing environments, about half of your cost is materials and half is labor. So I'm going to throw that assumption out there too. Long story short, with better efficiency and lower raw material costs, you could take a $20,000 battery and turn it into about an $8,500 battery and get the same range. That's some real dollars.
And that reduces, like you say, immediately the cost of the vehicles.
Yeah, if your vehicle, batteries typically are somewhere between 25 and 40% of the cost of the vehicle. So let's split that in half and say it's a third. So your $60,000 vehicle now is suddenly a $48,000 vehicle. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. It looks like Stephen Rose is chiming in regarding what we were talking about previously, the restrictions on reselling a Cybertruck within the first year. He says, I am glad Tesla is not allowing the trucks to be resold within a year because Elon has tried to keep the prices down. Why should a scalper come in and make a profit? Well, yeah.
You know, Stephen, that's exactly the point. That's why we see this. Tesla's not the first one to do this type of thing. That might be Tesla's strongest argument, is that there's potentially legal precedent to anti-scalping. And they just don't want to see people paying you know, $500,000 or $1 million for a car. I think of last year, the Girl Scout cookies, the little raspberry chocolate cookies.
They were so good, though.
They were so good.
The raspberries.
But you could find them if you could find them, you would have to find them on eBay, and you were paying up to $250 a box for these silly things.
Wow.
Cybertruck now is, I think there's a few of them. One's listed, I just saw this morning, for $287,000. So it's more than, you know, one and a half times the cost or something.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's so I get the logic. I just don't know that it's legally defensible.
Yeah.
I don't mind that Tesla's put that in. I think it'll scare a lot of people off. That's okay. You know, that's completely fine if they do that. But the fact is, I don't think their overall demand long term is going to be hurt that badly by having a few Cybertrucks that sell for really high prices.
No, not with all those pre-orders and backed up, pent up demand. Yeah.
So, Elon. One thing we haven't talked about yet is Elon talking about Tesla's appreciating in price, going up in price over time.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
It was many years ago, I believe, and I think reality has convinced everyone that that is not going to be the case.
Yeah, it's if I remember right, and well, I looked it up, so I unless my Chat GPT is wrong, thank you Chat GPT for this. 2019, he was saying this in a podcast that he expected with the context was, hey, once your car has full self-driving, why would it ever depreciate? Your car is only going to get better over time. It should increase in value over time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. Now for the Roadsters, that reality is true. Roadsters have increased over time. If even though you're not going to see a Roadster today for about 150,000, I think is what they typically sold for. Your typical Roadster today is now going to fetch somewhere between 75 and 110. Still, how many years ago was it that we were buying Roadsters for $15,000?
Yeah.
And they're back up to 110.
And continuing to increase. In fact, in our next podcast, in 5 minutes or so, when we close this one down and then switch over, we're going to be talking about Roadster valuation some. There's one on Bring a Trailer right now, which before this podcast started was sitting at $80,000. And it's a nice optioned Tesla Roadster. But yeah, the prices began to tank a bit, and it's because of supply and demand.
Yeah.
There were just a lot more people selling over the last year than we've ever had before. But that's beginning to straighten out a bit, and we're starting to see the market begin to return a bit. It'll be interesting to see how this Roadster does on Bring a Trailer. We also are going to be talking about the new Tesla Roadster and some amazing specifications that are now being touted. And we kind of suspected this was going to happen because the first announcement of the replacement Tesla Roadster, or Roadster number 2, was it's going to be a 1.9 second car, and everybody's jaw dropped. What I mean is 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. Well, today that's your average, Toyota Corolla.
That's what it feels
maybe
like.
Not that bad, but yeah, there's certainly cars that are exceeding that. Even Tesla's own lineup, the Plaid, for example. Well, there is a specification that's now being bandied about in 2015. Apparently, the commitment is that this car will be available, and they may not even call it a car anymore because this thing might be aerodynamic and hover off the ground a bit. So
it will be, and we might, come listen to us in another 8 minutes or so. You're going to learn some dates too. I finally have some potential dates for us.
Mm-hmm.
On YouTube, CDN user says, I'm surprised that Tesla doesn't do a limited run of orders that are auction style. Just for the few that truly can't wait.
Yeah, that would be, I'm sure there's a market. Well, there is a market there. What are we at? 244,000?
Yeah.
And 278 is the current asking. And I wouldn't be surprised if that thing gets snapped up.
I agree with you, CDN user. I don't know why. More places, not just Tesla, when you have something that's in super high demand, why the original sellers don't do more of this.
Right. We've got another picture, Jesse. It's called Cyber Hooligan. And there is I got to sneeze. Let me see if I can get rid of my sneeze. What do you do on a podcast when you have to sneeze? Well, probably what I just did, which is change the subject, and the sneeze went away. Cyber Hooligan is a EV aficionado that took a Tesla Model 3 and decided, I'd sure like to make this look and act more like a Lamborghini. So he initially began to put body parts onto a Model 3. And it was very crude, and no one really, it's difficult to see the end result. Well, this is what it is morphing into, and it is beginning to look like a supercar.
That's a great looking car. I remember seeing when he was on our podcast, we saw some very early pictures of this and watching the YouTube of him trying to pull that thing off the trailer because it was a crashed Model 3 that had been totaled. This is impressive. I really like what I see here.
So this is the latest iteration, and those of you interested, he's very active on Instagram. He has a few 100,000 on Instagram at the time he was on our podcast, and also YouTube. So Cyber Hooligan, and you can see what this Model 3 has morphed into.
Well, I think that's about it for us, Pete. We've got our new podcast coming in about 5 minutes, and looking forward to seeing what goes on with the Roadsters.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be live again here in 5 minutes on YouTube under the Tesla Roadster channel.